Hello everyone! Welcome to a brand new series here on the channel. Welcome to Porterverse OCs. In this series, I will go over each original character of my own creation that exists within my Thomas headcanon known as the Porterverse. This series won't be super long, as there aren't a whole lot of OCs roaming around the Porterverse, but I can guarantee that each major player original character will be covered. And what better way to kick off this new series than with the very first OC in the Porterverse, Sigrid. We will go over Sigrid's full backstory and what her personality traits are like. Let's start at the beginning in 1945. Without further ado, let's get into it. (1945) Doncaster Locomotive Works. Work on the first of Edward Thompson's L1 tank engine class is wrapping up. The first engine was completed alongside a twin, and both under service around the same time. One of these twins was none other than Sigrid, who was technically the prototype, as she was completed first. Sigrid chose her name after hearing crew members tell stories about the historical submarine figure. Sigrid loved how the real-life Sigrid of Rosdale was one of Thorkel's trusted lieutenants and her many exploits in the 1090s and 1100s, and thus he chose the name Sigrid. Sigrid will wear LNER apple green until nationalization took effect in 1948, when she was repainted into British Railways black. Since Sigrid was technically an extra engine of her class, she was often left with little to do under the LNER in British Railways, and was mostly just a backup engine in case one of her other siblings was indisposed. As a consequence, other engines paid little attention to Sigrid. Sigrid is an ambivert, and doesn't mind being left alone a whole lot, but would prefer to have more friends overall. Things would change for Sigrid in the summer of 1948, when the Arlesdale tramway fleet was in need of replacement on Sodor. In the sheds one night, with the other L1 and British Railways engines, a call was made for a volunteer to be transferred. As soon as the name Sodor was tossed around, Sigrid quickly jumped at the opportunity, and that was when Sigrid went to Sodor. Shortly after arriving on Sodor, Sigrid was fitted with the front and back cowcatchers at Crovan's Gate Locomotive Works to comply with the Sodor law that requires all engines on the tramways to have front and back cowcatchers minimum. After fitting out, Sigrid was promptly set up to Callan, the junction station that connected the Arlesdale tramway. This is where she met Toby for the first time. Toby would show Sigrid around and teach her everything about her new home. Following this, Toby would go on to the Farquhar branch line to work with Thomas and Percy. Sigrid would run the Arlesdale tramway as a single locomotive for the next 17 years. During that time, she made good friends with locals, rolling stock, and visiting engines alike. It was even reported that Sigrid had increased productivity and profits for the tramway by around 30%. Sigrid was finally happy with her new life. Things would sadly take a turn for the worse, however, when in 1965, British Railways pulled the plug on the tramway, and it was effectively closed. British Railways didn't care what happened to Sigrid, except for that they didn't want her to be in service anymore, and her fate was essentially left in the hands of the Northwestern region. The head of the region at the time, Sir Charles Topham Hatt II, knew that he couldn't just scrap Sigrid, but British Railways was also adamant on keeping her out of service. Because of this little loophole, Topham used it to his advantage and had Sigrid placed in storage at Arlesdale End, where the locals would look after her. Over the next 3 years, while tensions grew between Topham Hatt and British Railways, Sigrid sat in her shed at Arlesdale End, unable to move on her own. The tensions will come to a head in 1967 with Oliver's escape to Sodor revealing the true colors of British Railways. British Railways was secretly planning to scrap engines without notice in 1968, and Oliver was narrowly able to escape this. And given that there were a lot of tensions brewing between the two, the Northwestern region sued British Railways itself over this and many other issues. When the big legal battle finally concluded in 1968, the region was given independence, and British Railways was no longer in control. This will effectively make the Northwestern region the Northwestern Railway once again. The NWR was officially reborn. Just hours after the ruling came out, Sigrid's original crew ran over the Arlesdale End and flung her shed doors open as they danced around her in joy before getting her ready for the next chapter of her life. Sigrid was officially preserved. Sigrid was brought to Kroblinski Locomotive Works, where she was repaired and also repainted. Tom had allowed Sigrid to pick her livery herself. After some pondering, she eventually settled on Toby's livery, as he was the one who trained her when she first arrived, and was the first engine since her mainland days that wanted to be her friend. Tom agreed, and Sigrid was painted up into northwestern chocolate brown with cream accenting and blue lining. Toby was very humbled by this, as you can imagine. By early 1969, Sigrid was back on the Arsdale tramway. Sigrid would eventually be joined on the tramway by the likes of Flora, a little tram engine, and two American diesels known as Riff and Jiff in 1972. Riff and Jiff were assigned to the interurban line that they connected via the middle station on a line known as Arlesbluff, and Flora was assigned to passenger duties on the tramway. The most recent addition to the tramway was a little bobber caboose named Bruno, who arrived in 1990. Sigrid will become the mentors of Flora, Riff, and Jiff, and the four engines will all eventually become great friends with each other. And that is where Sigrid's story currently is, still happily running her Arsdale tramway. When it comes to character, Sigrid is described as a slightly energetic and bubbly type, similar to, say, Mina Ashido. However, she also tends to zone out occasionally due to her ADHD. It isn't super common for her to zone out, but idling super long at stations can understandably lead to her zoning out. Same thing with very monotonous conversations. She's also a bit insecure about her design flaws, as the L1 class was originally designed for passenger services, but didn't yield spectacular results in that area. Instead, they yielded better results in the freight regions, and this is where the L1s thrived. Sigrid is usually annoyed when it's brought up, as she prefers to focus on her strong suits, but is still very aware of the design flaws in the end. Despite this, Sigrid is described as a hard worker that always strives to do her best, and loves hanging out with her friends on the tramway. Sigrid is also an avid fan of movie night, and usually races back to the sheds at the end of the day whenever a movie night is planned. Some of our favorite movies include The Tipfield Thunderbolt, Return of the Jedi, and Jujutsu Kaisen 0, among many other films. Sigrid is often described as the engine with the best movie knowledge amongst Sudrian engines, and often assists in choosing the movies for movie night events. Overall, Sigrid is perceived as a very kind and bubbly engine, one that looks past her faults and continues forward no matter what. And that is Sigrid of Arsdale, the first OC of the Porterverse. And just like that, we have reached the end of the episode. That was the history of Sigrid. I had a lot of fun writing this video. And for those wanting to use Sigrid in their own stories and such, I kindly ask that you hold off for that for now, as I would like to finish her debut stories and get those out first. I've been working on them for a good 5 or so months now, and once I finish writing those stories and adapt them on my own, then you'll all be free to adapt and use the stories and characters as you wish. Just wait until I'm done. That sound good? The first story I've already finished writing, and I want to get the second story finished eventually too, and then the third and fourth one too. I'm hoping to get at the very least the first story filmed and released within this year, so stay tuned for that. And also feel free to comment what you all think of this new series. I would love to see any feedback you guys have. And if you have any interest in having this series continue, then do tell in the comments. All comments regarding this are welcome. Thank you all very much for watching this episode of Porterverse OCs, and I shall see you all same time next week.